Well, we've turned the mics back on, and this is Radio Entrepreneurs. Again, welcome to our listeners. And, for those who don't know or are new to the show, we've interviewed over 6,000 guests. We've had over 1 million people connect with the show over 6 years. And, that's due in small part to my man to my left, my co-host for this segment, Mark Z from Mark Z Legal Staffing.
Thank you, Jeff. I remember when this was your and our vision when we first began this years ago, and you've been an amazing leader, and it's been a great ride.
And this isn't what we do for a living. This is just our sideline.
Right. This is something we enjoy, and talking to some top leaders, and you know how passionate I am about legal, and our next guest having to have a top leader like her.
Right. And we want to thank the law firm of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rogers for sponsoring this segment. Our next guest, Mary Beth Sweeney, partner at Atwood Cherny. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mary Beth, tell us about your practice, because I know Mark was so excited when you came in the room to talk about you before the mics were on. So tell us.
I practice family law and estate litigation. I've been doing that for just about 22 years. I've been at Atwood Cherny the entire 22 years. My practice focuses on everything from child abduction cases, those are Hague Convention cases, to removal cases or relocation, as it's known in New Hampshire. I do practice in both states. I also do regular child custody cases. I will try complex financial divorces. I work oftentimes with business valuation experts, vocational experts, real estate experts. I try prenuptial agreement cases, again, both in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. And my work is also focusing on what's called collaborative law. So collaborative law is a movement that is sweeping across the United States where parties agree to enter into a participation agreement before the process begins, and essentially the lawyers and the clients and a mediator are working together to resolve a case entirely without litigating the case. The interesting part of collaborative law and the focus of keeping you in the process is if the process fails, and I've never had one that has failed yet, then you have to discharge your collaborative law attorneys and go and hire litigation counsel. I also moved my practice into the area of mediation and arbitration approximately 15 years ago when I realized that litigation was extremely difficult for children and families, and mediation is often a way that families can craft divorce agreements that are more family-friendly as opposed to what a court might do.
Mary Beth, what's interesting about you is because you've got such a premier litigation background that it's like a corporate, like some litigators to be a counselor with business. You are a top litigator and you're a counselor to families, and I think that's so unusual. It's also, when you're using the collaborative law, having somebody who's not just a regular family lawyer, somebody that has that high-end litigation background that you've done, so you understand what the consequences could be from the time you talk to families. And then look at the mediation line. You have a lot of different wings in your practice that you can bring to a family, and because litigation really does affect families, as the studies have shown, it really has implications way down the line, even people that have become very mature adults.
I completely agree with that. And one of the measuring sticks I use when I meet with a prospective client, I talk to them about all the different avenues in terms of getting a divorce, whether it's using collaborative law or focusing on a more traditional litigation channel. But in my collaborative law meetings, I am very clear with parties that if, for example, your particular facts and circumstances were before a typical Massachusetts or New Hampshire judge, this is the type of result you'd likely achieve. And most of the clients at that point in time on both sides of the table raise their eyebrows and think to themselves, wow, maybe this isn't the best process for me, and maybe I should stay in this collaborative law process and try to get a resolution that is fair-minded for my family and saves money.
So often I do a lot of work in family business, have for almost 35 years, and so often I work with families in business, and I think to myself, oh my, they should be divorced. But they're scared to talk to attorneys, and there is a sort of gap between, and I think even just talking to an attorney would help solve a lot of problems that are just festering and staying there for almost the lifetime of a family. that it doesn't mean they have to go to litigation, but they do need somebody to intervene who can tell them some facts and deal with them. Do you find that as well, that there's a resistance to talking to attorneys, that people just need to talk to somebody?
I actually find that people open up to me pretty easily, and I have worked with brothers, for example, or sisters who are each getting divorced and what that means for each of their businesses. I have worked with families that have closely held corporations and how prenuptial agreements might affect their family, postnuptial agreements might affect their family, and how a long-term marriage, for example, could impact their business and business relationships. So it is certainly important for families that work together to meet with lawyers and craft agreements and protective estate planning documents in the event of a dissolution, whether of the business partnership itself or of a divorce.
It's so important today in terms of that consulting or that counseling, and the traditional, and Jeff and I know a lot of situations like that, traditional response when you talk about family law attorneys is that they feed in to the emotional frenzy, and what happens is it jacks up the legal fees, and then you have a lot of problems down the line, and you still have problems, whereas if you take that approach to really counseling them and try to take away some of the emotion,
For resolution.
right. And,
Yeah.
especially when there are kids involved. I mean, when it's just two adults that want to battle it out, there's a point that obviously, I'm sure with you, there's only certain counseling you can do, and they'll do that, and you're like, okay, if that's what you want to do, here's been your alternative. But in terms of with families and high net worth and small businesses, the counseling role that it sounds like you really are actively involved with, I just think is so invaluable.
Which is why when the National Association of Divorce Professionals recently asked me to found the Boston chapter, I immediately said yes. The process that they use and that I've always used when I take on a new client is to look at every aspect that's going on in their lives. Do you have a child with special needs? Are they having educational issues? Are both parents on the same board as to whether or not a child should be in a special school or whether a child can be mainstreamed? I will set those types of families up with professionals in the psychological field that can assist them in crafting agreements and providing information to each of the parents that will help them navigate through the process of, for example, a divorce. I oftentimes have cases that involve assets that might be hidden. I might have one party that really hasn't been the primary financier of the family. They may not be involved, and they've relied upon their spouse to provide information to them, so I will set them up with experts so that somebody can take a look at their overall global financial picture. And I never like to leave my people alone. When they come to me, I always set them up with a psychologist to work with them, and sometimes their children as well, because going through a divorce it's a very stressful process for people, and I'm very expensive. It makes no economic sense for them to pay me to be their personal psychological counselor. I'd rather set them up with a professional in that field. And I will do the same thing if someone needs a real estate expert. If someone hasn't had a job or an income stream and I know that they want to stay in the marital home, I will set them up early on with a mortgage company and
wonderful.
with somebody that will deal with and look at their credit. A lot of people think Credit Karma is your credit score. It's absolutely not. You really need to look at Experian, and you need to look at TransUnion in order to determine what your actual credit is. And I will find creative and unique programs and products available to clients so that they are able to refinance and stay in a home for themselves and their children that might not use traditional criteria in terms of assessing their overall financial ability to pay a mortgage.
Well, as a management consultant working with a lot of families, I've seen a lot of what you're talking about from the other side. But, the first thing I think you said when we first turned on the mics was what really pulled on my heartstrings, and I wanted to go back to that. You said you've worked with child abduction. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you got into that? I don't even know how you can deal with that stuff. It would just break my heart.
I had a client years ago who came to see me before his children were abducted, and I was immediately concerned about a potential abduction issue, given the other side. And unfortunately, by the time he returned to me, his wife had actually kidnapped the children and taken them to a non-Hague Convention country. I had to work with him for approximately 2 years and work with the United States State Department and work with the embassy. abroad in order to secure the return of the children. But in the meantime, I spoke to him so frequently, and he missed 18 months of his twins' lives. And I mean, those are the times when your children learn to walk, where they're learning to babble, where they're opening their eyes and looking at the world around them. And I became very interested in that. So I've continued that portion of my practice ever since.
That's wonderful. You're talking to two fathers who didn't want to be without their kids for 1 week. So imagine 18 months. That's just a heartbreaker.
You know, just to follow that up also, I'm finding because of now the global economy and this everything is international, you're seeing more of that. You're reading more about that, where wives are a lot of time when or mothers are taking kids away, you know, and
Or
then accusing
husbands.
Well, I was going to say both of them are accusing the husbands of abuse, so they're hiding, and then husbands are taking. And fathers are taking their kids, and it's just a shame when they have it planned or supervised. So I think your role becomes more and more crucial in this area that seems to be emerging, or you're hearing about it more and more.
We've been speaking with Mary Beth Sweeney, partner at Atwood Cherny, very emotionally charged and intellectually charged topic. I think everything except for the child abduction, as you talk, I think about people that I know that have been going through the problems that you've said, both current and past. And if someone, and I do think a lot of people who are dealing with these issues, is looking for someone in this area and wants to find you, how would they find you?
You can access our website, atwoodandcherny.com. You can email me directly at mbsweeney with an EY at atwoodcherny with an NY.com. Or you can speak to my ever-ready assistant, Brianne Queso, who can find me wherever I am.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today. We hope we can get you to come back again and talk about some of these subjects in detail.
Thank you both.
Great. Remind everybody, this is Radio Entrepreneurs. My partner to my left is the fabulous Mark Z Legal Staffing. And again, thank you to the law firm of Tarlow, Breedhart, and Rogers. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.